Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants Hangout. My name is Joe Grabowski. I'll be your host for today. For those who don't know, we're all about bringing science, adventure, and conservation into classrooms across North America and hopefully beyond. Welcome to Monday. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest, Páll Davidsson. He's coming to us from Iceland today, and he is a pro at these Hangouts with us. He hung out with my classroom before Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants started, and he's also done some Hangouts with us since the organization launched. So he's the founder of the Global Glacier Initiative. It's an organization dedicated to raising global awareness about climate change and what's happening to our ice, glaciers and sea ice. As most of you know, they're melting rapidly, and that's discharging into our ocean, creating water shortages. It's happening at an unprecedented rate in human history. Páll also works with the United Nations and has spent some time in Sudan. So, Páll, it's absolutely wonderful to have you joining us today.
Thank you very much, Joe. Very nice to meet you, all the kids. Welcome to Iceland. Now, in my first class, when I was hanging out with Joe, I was actually on the top of a glacier communicating to your students why glaciers are important, right? I want to continue doing that. I want to talk to you about glaciers, snow and ice, why this is vitally important, and why we should be listening to the message of what these essential elements of the earth are communicating with us. But I will be doing it from a very different place. Going on the top of a glacier is quite an adventure, right? And it's a little bit too cold for right now. But I'm doing it from what is actually a power factory here in Iceland. It's an energy producing place. Interestingly, I have my office here. And this is an energy center that was powered by coal. So Iceland has two very interesting things, right? We have geothermal energy and we have glaciers. And both of these connect. So while we built this power station, it is now abundant. It's just few innovators, few NGOs, etc. We have our center here, right? Why did we stop it? We stopped it because of the pollution and how that is affecting our environment. And now almost all houses in Iceland are heated by geothermal water. And in case you don't know what that is, it's basically hot water coming from the earth that we can tap and we can push into our houses to generate electricity and warmth, which is very good if you live in Iceland. Now, what I want to do with you is to talk about something which you see very often in nature, right? And probably take as totally granted. It's the snow that you use to throw snowballs. It's the ice that you see in adventure movies, right? And of course, Frozen made this mark on. I want to see if I can throw in a few slides, but check first. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Beautiful. And I hope you can cope with my accent.
It's fine. We can hear you loud and clear.
Beautiful. Let me see for a second. Oops. It's the share screen, right?
Yeah, and then make sure you pick the first option to share your whole desktop.
I had it on my screen just a second ago. Sorry.
That's okay.
Just bear with me for a second, huh?
No big deal.
Here we are.
So how long has that plant been closed for?
It's actually been in the 1960s. The Icelandic government made a very interesting decision, which is that rather than importing energy, we should explore and use the energy that we had in Iceland, right? Makes sense, no? And so instead, rather than having oil ships and coal ships bringing in electricity from the Middle East in the US, we started looking at what we have here in Iceland. And in fact, geothermal energy exists all around the world. But Iceland, being a volcanic island, has it particularly accessible. We sit here. Now, okay, I have my screen up, so this is good. Film. You.
Yeah, so if you click the green button, it's going to give you options, and then just pick the first one that's to share the whole screen.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So as you say that I click on it's on Google Hangout, the green button, share.
There we go. I see me. That's a good sign.
You see? Okay, and this one here.
And I see it. Yep, we're good.
Okay, perfect. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, think about the Earth when you look at it from space. And what you will see are the brown colors. You will see the skies and the blue ocean. But you will also see another thing, right? You will see the white of the Arctic and the Antarctic. That is the North Pole and the South Pole. And this element is now disappearing at a rate which we humans have never seen. And this is happening all around the world, right? So let's try to figure out what is snow? What is ice? It's literally just frozen water, right? And what is so unique about planet Earth is that planet Earth is in the Goldilocks zone, which means that it's at a distance far enough from the Earth for water to remain in liquid form. It doesn't evaporate because it's too warm. And it's also close enough for water to indeed be in liquid form, not to be frozen, because if you go further away, you're going to have water in totally frozen form. So the basic message I have to you is that we have water in all these forms. Water is essential to life. Water is essential to our civilization. And we need to keep it in all these forms. And now what is happening is that water is changing and it's becoming more and more liquid and less frozen. And this we can see in various places on Earth. We can see it in the seasonal snow and ice, which is the yearly snow and ice which is forming. So you can play with in your garden, but disappears in spring. You can see it in glaciers. What are glaciers? Glaciers are basically snow which has been packed and has accumulated over the years, and it's so heavy that it can actually move on its own, just through the force of gravity, right? So it's there for many years. And then, of course, frozen seawater, like in high latitudes, sea ice, permafrost, frozen earth, and then continental scale ice sheets, which are major ice sheets, in the Arctic and the Antarctic, right? Now, if we talk about the Arctic, right? Here's a quick picture of that. It's the area, 8 countries that outline the Arctic, including the United States, right? And this is a typical view of the Arctic. Looks very barren, very blue, very white, and covered by ice. Now, what is happening with this ice is that huge meltwater lakes have started to form, right? And on those glaciers, you have huge channels where water is pouring, where there was solid ice before. Because of these changes, is gradually disappearing, right? So you can see how far it reached in 1979, and now it is much smaller in 2012. Of course, this ice always changes depending on whether it's summer or whether it's winter. So this is the average, right? The ice is getting thinner and it covers less area. Another thing which is happening in the Arctic is the thaw of the permafrost. So if you look at all this purple area indicated, this is an area where the earth is very hard, right? And why is it so hard? It is hard because there is frozen ice in the earth and has been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And on top of this, people build their houses and roads. And because it's melting, infrastructure is being destroyed. Because you can imagine you had this very hard, very solid earth underneath you, and now it's all wobbly. And what is also happening is that all kinds of gases that are kept by the frost is like when you put a thing in a freezer, right? It stays there, it's cool, it doesn't smell. But once you start to take it out, all kinds of things start to be released. And one of the things that is released because of this is methane. Methane that has been created through the germination of all kinds of plants that have collected under the permafrost and in the permanence for thousands of years and is now being released. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, so potent that you can actually burn it where it's coming. So this is the Arctic. Now, what is also happening is that in the mountains of the world, be it the Alps, be it the Rockies, be it the Andes, be it the Everest, glaciers are disappearing at a very rapid rate. So I want to show you this very old card of the Rhone Glacier in Switzerland, right? You see the house in the front? And then a picture, drawn a picture of the glacier. Here's another picture, taken 50, 77 years later. Definitely smaller. Another picture taken 1981, and then again with the house, and the glacier has disappeared, or at least the tongue of the glacier has disappeared. And this is not just happening in the Alps, this is in Africa, the famous glacier of Kilimanjaro. And in 1970, the year that I was born, it reached this far. Now there is almost nothing left of it. This is the Columbia Glacier in Alaska. You see that the line of the glacier, it has declined by 300 meters. Huge distance. And here's a picture from Everest. And you will see where the ice was in 1921. And this is the same place, and how much has changed and disappeared since then. In just a century, the ice has thinned by 110 meters. You would have to calculate that into feet. I'm not sure how much that is. And same thing is, of course, happening on the South Pole. That huge ice shelves are calving away from the main island. Okay? Now, this is all very dramatic. And it's probably all happening pretty far away from you. Now, why should you care? Let me tell you a few important things why you should care about these changes, right? Because ice is our friend. One thing is that ice is the largest store of fresh water on the planet after the oceans, right? So all this water in the glaciers is greater than all the water in all the lakes and all the rivers that you have ever seen. And now this water is being deposed and changed, is going from the glaciers and into the oceans with the very natural consequence that sea levels rise, right? Sea level has risen since almost a century by approximately 20 centimeters, right? And the fear is that it will go up to 1 meter. This is actually a huge change. Here you see, for instance, the land in southeastern USA that would go underwater just by it rising 1 meter, right? And just think that 1 meter is not just going to stay there. There would be all kinds of weather that will make the rise even more impactful. It will infiltrate water sources. So 1 meter of still water is not that much. 1 meter, and then you add to it all kinds of other natural elements, is huge. and then they start to engulf land. And here you see the impact in the San Francisco Bay. And this is just 1 meter, right? If we melted all of the Earth's water and all of the Earth's ice, water would rise by 80 meters, right? So you see the green line. This shows you how far the world's oceans would go. They would cover New York, they would cover your capital, Washington, they would go very far. Now, this is not happening anytime in the future, but it gives you an idea of how much water is stored in this ice. And just to have an idea, today there is big debate, in particular now in the US, about refugees, right? These are refugees that are being displaced because of conflict. They're happening in isolated pockets of the planet, right? And the hope is always that these people can return once there is peace. Sea levels will rise, then we're gonna have hundreds of millions displaced, and not because of conflict, but because where they lived doesn't exist anymore. It's now underwater. And this graph shows you an estimate that by every meter, you're gonna have 100 million people displaced, right? Seeking refuge. So that's gonna have huge consequences. Another thing is that it's going to have a huge impact on economies. Do you remember the first picture that I showed you, where the north looks very barren? It looks very white and very blue. Now, the truth is that these are one of the most fertile parts of the planet. There is no coincidence that the largest predator on the earth, on land, the polar bear, habits the north, right? Because he can hunt so much. And the huge whales, they go there also. There is something in the mixture of the cold ice combining with salt water and solar light that creates a very fertile conditions. And now this ice that creates those fertile conditions is disappearing, right? So basically it's like you're removing a whole forest that so many species get their food from and get their refuge from, right? The den for the polar bears, the home of the polar bears, and the land on which it hunts is the ice. And now that is disappearing, right? Now, with all this water stored in ice, depend on it for water and electricity. Here is another picture from the Himalayan region. And you see that all the major rivers of the world, the Indus, the Ganges, the Sichuan, the Yellow River, they originate from the Tibetan Plateau. They originate from glaciers in the Himalayan region. So if you take away that water source, you're taking away a major supply of water for the world. And one beautiful thing is that what is actually happening now on our planet is that snow accumulates throughout the whole winter, right? It's basically a store of water. So for instance, throughout the whole Rocky Mountains, you have huge heaps of water being stored on the slopes of the mountains. But then what happens is that when it starts to melt, it gradually trickles downstream. It gradually trickles downhill to communities there, and exactly in the period where the growing season is, where the farmers need the water the most, right? And then, of course, you have all kinds of other activities, such as skiing, etc., that are entirely dependent on ice and snow. Leo DiCaprio mentioned that in a recent movie that he did, they had such problems in finding ice and snow for the movie that they had to go almost to the North Pole. And then to emphasize that many cultures, like my own, they are used to living with snow. This is our culture, right? This is the environment that we grow up in. It's vital for our animals. It creates the conditions by which we thrive. and it helps our planet in so many ways. So this is why we are mobilizing and organizing initiatives to engage kids like you and other people to save our glaciers, because we need them for our living. And finally, a small point from Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, which says that if we don't change direction, we will likely end up where you're headed. And where we're heading into is a world without ice. Thank you for listening.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that with us today. A really good overview of what's happening to our ice and what could happen when we do lose it. So if you want to click the share screen one more time, that'll bring you back to us. And then,
okay, yes. And what do I need to click?
Oh, sorry, just click the green button again. There we go. All right. Let's meet some of our classrooms and let's get some questions going.
Perfect.
Okay, so our first group, okay, we'll visit Mrs. Zamora's group in San Antonio, Texas. So they probably don't have a lot of ice.
Beautiful.
There's a couple grade 4 classes joining us there today, and your microphone should be on.
Come here, quick, walk around. Just stand right there, and then I'm going to pan the whole class so you can wave before you ask this question. We are ready when you are. Are you there?
I am good. Please go ahead.
First of all, this is our class from San Antonio, Texas. We have 2 classes in here.
Beautiful.
And we're having an extremely warm winter this winter also. Most of our temperatures are in the 70s.
Wow.
Yeah, today is going to be about 75, almost 80 degrees this week.
Wow.
This is Connor, and he's got a question. Go ahead, Connor.
How far can glacier travel?
He's wondering how far the longest glaciers have traveled.
Oh, you know, actually, glaciers have traveled so far, they have covered the whole Earth. Now, this never existed here, right? So it all depends on the temperature. If the weather is cold enough and it stays cold enough, it can travel really, really far. You, the teacher, may be able to jump in here, but during the last age, I think it went all the way to New York State, from the Arctic to New York State, if not further, right? So ice can travel really far, but it can also disappear very quickly. And that is what is happening right now.
Do we have time for one more question?
Absolutely.
I want to on that.
Okay.
Because
go ahead.
The interest.
Wait.
Please.
Go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Ask yours.
How long does it take for a glacier to melt completely?
Have we lost the glacier completely?
Yes. It depends on the size. Some glaciers are so big that they're as big as countries, where others are much smaller, right? It is always counted, though, in years, right? Glaciers are disappearing in years. Let me give you one example. In the last decades, we have lost something, the world has lost something like 600 glaciers. And if the current trends continue, right? If the warming continues, what's going to happen is that Glacier National Park will be without glaciers by 2030, 2040. So in 10, 20 years, Glacier National Park may not have any more glaciers. And Iceland may not have any glaciers in like 200 years.
All right. Great questions. Let's visit Mrs. Barch's group. Their grade 4 is joining us in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Your microphone's on.
Hi, my name's Jack. And what animals have you seen in Iceland?
What animals?
Yep.
Okay. We have not so many animals because it's an island, right? So when it comes to indigenous animals, that is animals that we did not bring in as Vikings, you have elks, for instance, you have foxes, and range of birds. But when it comes to sea life, it is very, very rich. We have whales, we have killer whales, we have dolphins. The dolphin in Free Willy, for instance, he was from Iceland, right? So many animals in the air, many animals in the ocean, but not so many on land, apart from the animals that we bring to Iceland.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Dan.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Danny.
Hello, Jenny.
What made you want to study disappearing glaciers?
That's Jenny. The reason I want to study it is because I worked, and this may sound strange, but I'm going to explain it. I work very much in Africa. And I see that in Africa, people need water. So they always go and chase the water. And what is happening in Africa is so many water resources are disappearing because of the warming. So I started thinking, okay, oh, this is really bizarre. Now, what are the biggest store of water? And what's going to happen when this water store disappears? And then I found out that the glaciers were the biggest. And then I found out that so few people were doing anything to save the glaciers. And this is why I thought this is something that I can do. And there is another reason, which is that glaciers, they are my homeland. They live in they're in my home garden, right? So they are a story that I can share with the world. I cannot tell people what is happening to the forest, because in Iceland we have no forests. But I can tell the world what is happening to our glaciers. So I think we all have an obligation to tell the world what is happening in our environment.
All right, thank you for those great questions in Thunder Bay. We're actually going to jump to another class in Thunder Bay. Mr. Cameron's grade 5-6s are joining us. Your microphone is on.
Hi, my name is Danica, and my question is, how can we make a difference and save the glaciers?
Oh, that's another very good question, huh? The biggest thing that you can do, because why are the glaciers disappearing? They're disappearing for the same reason that ice in your fridge is disappearing when you leave it open, right? It gets too warm when it gets too warm. And the whole environment on the planet is getting warmer because we are putting chemicals into it, called greenhouse gases, that retain the heat, that make the planet warmer, right? So what we need to do is that we need to talk to our parents and check what is happening, and we need to coexist with the planet in a way that doesn't pollute it, right? So if we can use a bike rather than a car, then we are polluting less, right? If we can use an electric car than a gas pumping car, then we're polluting less. But I think one of the most important things that you, the young generation, can do is to talk to your parents and tell them that you're concerned, because you want to save the glaciers and you want the world with ice in it. You want the world that is not too warm, because animals and people suffer in a world that is too warm.
Hi, my name is Dominic, and how much will the water rise if all the glaciers melt away?
Oh, that is huge, huh? If
And
all the glaciers melt away, all the world's glaciers, right? Sea levels, they will rise by something like 60 to 80 meters. It is very, very much, right? So that basically means, as I mentioned, that we're going to have the seas covering all of New York and covering all of Washington, just to give you two examples, right? But at the same time, I'm telling you, that is not going to happen anytime in the near future, right? Because so much of the ice is kept in places where it's going to continue to be cold. Right? But even if it rises just by 1 meter, that has dramatic consequences. Hundreds of millions of people will displace. They will lose their homes.
Can you
Thank
follow
you.
up question?
Yeah, I heard you had a second part to that question. Go ahead.
And who will be affected the most?
The people most affected, and that is the sad thing, is the poor people who didn't cause this pollution. It's people living, for instance, in small islands in the Pacific, and many of those islands are now literally disappearing, right? So if you see beautiful postcards of a beautiful sandy beach with palm trees, this is a very fragile environment because a small rise in sea level means that the whole island gets inundated, right? So the risk is that many people, they will not just lose their land, they will lose the country they live on. And some countries are now even buying land elsewhere so that the whole population can move if we choose from melting. So the people who have no effect on this, the people who didn't do anything to warm the planet, are the people who are suffering the most. And that is injustice that we need to respond to. Do you agree? Good.
All right. Yes, I right with you there. We had a journalist last year who talked to us about her time in Kiribati, where people have already lost their homes, where they've had to buy large portions of land in Fiji because places like there and the Marshall Islands are disappearing really quickly. And like you said, the huge injustice is these are the people who've had the smallest, if any, impact on global warming whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's right.
All right. Let's meet another classroom. We have Mr. Bernie's grade 7/8 joining us in Aurelia, Ontario. Your microphone is on.
Yeah, go up. Hi, I'm Alexis. Can we use geothermal activities?
Yeah. I didn't hear the question, sorry.
Hi, my name is Alexis. Can we use geothermal activity as an energy source in Canada? I need to be louder.
Sorry, Paul, the question was, in Canada, will we be able to use geothermal activity as an energy source?
Okay, yes, very good question. Geothermal energy exists all around the world, right? And what you need is that you need warm earth and you need water, right? And you're always going to have those two elements, but it's accessible in various degrees. What's usually happening is that, like in Canada, you have the tar sands, you have the oil coming through your pipelines, so you're more used to it, right? You're not used to looking for geothermal energy, but it's there somewhere. So you need, just as we look for oil, I would say, in order to save the planet, we need to search for these alternative sources, including geothermal energy. And let me tell you another thing. Once you find it, life is good. I was, for instance, in a summer house the whole weekend, and I could fill in a hot jacuzzi in the middle of the winter without any problems, because we get this free hot water from the earth. So it's definitely worth looking for.
Okay.
My name is Brittany Lynn, and I was wondering if global warming doesn't stop, will polar bears and all the other Arctic animals become extinct?
So I think the speaker is a little bit bad. I hear badly now. What is it? Is global warming?
If global warming doesn't stop, will polar bears and other Arctic animals become extinct?
So if I hear you correctly, is global warming causing species to become extinct?
Yes.
Exactly. Definitely, yes. all life on the planet depends on the climate that we live in. Give a very simple example, right? The polar bears, they use the ice to create a den where they can nurture their children, right? They also use the land, use the ice as the hunting ground, right? So when you have extensive ice, they can go out and hunt the seals. If you take this away from them, they are stranded on land. They cannot nurture their children, and they cannot go out hunting, and they die, right? It is really often as simple as that. When you take away a habitat for an animal, whether it is a tree or it's ice, they cannot live. And this is why we're saying we want a world without ice, because so many species, animal species, are on the ice. And also another thing, the ice is bringing fresh water, right? Because ice cannot be salty. So ice is fresh water. It is bringing fresh water to the mountains, and it's bringing fresh water to the Arctic. That is very important to the animals. So yes, it can definitely affect species.
All right, great questions. Who do we have joining us next? Let's go to Mrs. Hartman's group, joining us, I believe, from Brampton, Ontario, from Eagle Plains Public School. If you don't, oh, I can reach your mic. It's on. Go ahead.
What types of glaciers are there in Iceland?
So yeah, what makes?
What types of glaciers are there in Iceland?
Interesting, huh? So we have, it's kind of a technical question. We have a number of glaciers. Some glaciers are crawling glaciers, right? These are glaciers that, if you see valleys, they come through the valleys and they move. And actually very much of the landscape that you may know has been carved by glaciers, right? Glaciers are one of the most powerful elements of the planet in carving our landscape. And then we have also glacier hubs, with like basically huge amount of ice, right? And it just stays there, it doesn't move. But from that, you have all kinds of glacier outlets. So we have most of the types of glaciers here in Iceland.
How much of the world's surface is taken up by glaciers?
Interesting question. What I can tell you is that if we don't just think about glaciers, but we think about snow, because we're talking about water when it's frozen, then it's up to like 33% of the planet can be covered by this. But it of course changes because there's more when there's snow and there's less when the snow has melted. But it can reach like 1/3 of the planet when it's most. And actually one important function of the ice is that ice is the most reflective surface of the planet, right? Nothing beams sun's rays back into space as powerfully as ice. So for instance, when you go into ice and you get this glare and you cannot see anything, this is because all the sun that's coming down is going back into space, right? So it's very important to have this coverage, because it's like we have a sunscreen on the planet that is protecting us. And if you take away the sunscreen that covers like 1/3 of the planet, then all this heat stays and the planet becomes even warmer. Thank you for the question.
All right, great question and a great answer. So our final group is joining us, Mr. Leonard's group from Guelph, Ontario. Your microphone is on, and just remind me what age group you are as well.
Great.
We're from Kitchener and we're great.
Actually, we're from Kitchener, but that's cool. We're grade 7, and my name's Gaston. The question is, can glaciers go back to how they were? And if they can, how long will it take?
So, Gaston, what do you say? Can glaciers go back to?
How they were before, and if they can, how long will it take?
Yeah. Yeah, yes, glaciers are constantly changing, right? Changing, same thing, right? But usually they remain what is called constant, right? So they go and they come back, they go and come back, right? But what is happening is that they're always more and more going back, right? Let's say some 150 years ago, there were actually fewer glaciers in the world, right? But then the climate got colder and they grew again. This, which is very important for us to follow, because this is in fact nature talking to us, right? Nature is talking to us. When the glaciers are melting, nature is telling us, guys, the planet is getting warmer. And when the glaciers are growing, the planet is telling us, guys, the planet is getting colder, right? Because sometimes it's very difficult to measure those little small changes. And maybe you in your daily life, you don't feel any big changes, but you can see those changes in the glaciers, right? So this is in fact one of the important messages of nature to the planet, that something very important is changing because the glaciers are disappearing and the Arctic ice and the snow cover is disappearing all around the globe. And we need to do something. So thank you for the question.
Any other questions?
All right, if you guys have one more, you can have the final question today.
What was your question? Well, I don't know. Prince Edward Island? Maybe, but you talked about that.
We're still trying to come up with another question. A lot of the questions have been answered at this point that the students have asked.
Okay.
Sure. We'll give you guys another second if you have one more.
Yeah.
How long has he been studying glaciers?
There you go.
Hi, my name is Michelle, and my question is, how long have you been studying glaciers for?
Actually, I'm not very new to this, huh? Many people have been studying glaciers for many, many years. And they dedicate their whole lives to it. And in fact, the first person in Iceland to study glaciers, he was considered crazy when he wanted to study glaciers. He's an old man now, but he's alive and he's a friend of mine. And he was considered crazy because, hey, nobody studied glaciers. They are just these white things up in the mountains. Today, he's a very famous professor, and people in India and America, they want him because now everybody wants to know about the glaciers, right? And so the message is that it's never too late. And the message is also that people bring in different perspectives. I am not what is called a glaciologist, right? You have people who are much more knowledgeable about glaciers than me. What I am is that I'm an activist, right? My specialization is connecting people with what is happening and organizing campaigns to get people respond to the fact that glaciers are disappearing. So I work with glaciers. And this is what I think needs to happen in the world today, is that we work more together. So the people who have been studying the glaciers, they work with educators like Joe, they work with activists like me. And they work with students like you, and together we can find solutions. Because I remember one of the questions is, what can we do? One of the girls were asking the question, what can we do? We don't have all the answers, but we can start searching for the answers. And that's very much up to us and you, the young people.
All right. Well, you know, we can't help but, you know, we have to thank you for spending this time with us and sharing the story of the glaciers with us, because, you know, like you mentioned, we're far removed from it, but it does have implications for us and people all around the world. So once again, it's great to have you joining us, and you're always welcome to share your story and what you're doing with the Global Glacier Initiative with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants.
Thank you. It was definitely an honor. And kids, thank you for the great questions. And thank you for giving me and the glaciers an hour of your time. And keep on remembering, huh? and keep on discussing with your parents. Thank you so much.
All right, I'm going to turn the microphones on, give the classrooms a chance to say goodbye, and thank you. All right, thank you everybody for joining in. Thank you for the great questions. Páll, thanks for the great lesson and bringing us to Iceland. Yeah, we're signing off for today, but we look forward to having you again in the future.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, Joe. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Bye-bye.